All right, folks. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? Great, great. All right, so it's a great pleasure to be here in Boston. It's my second time speaking. And as many of you, I have attended QCon events for a very long time, since 2010, back in São Paulo, Brazil. So it's a great pleasure to be on the speaker side of things after so many years on the attendee side. So this talk is going to be a bit about my journey on the engineering management path over the last 8 years. So I'm going to go over what it took for me personally and also in terms of organization strategy to get to a org of over 100 engineers. And I was talking to a few people early this morning that this might be one of the last standing talks on the topic of scaling to 100 plus, especially with AI and a lot of things kind of spreading a lot more and having smaller teams doing a lot more. Maybe there's still going to be a big thing in big OpenAIs, Anthropic, or things that are scaling and AI is still not able to keep it up with demand. But I think it is a very interesting story and I hope you take a lot from this. So oops, sorry, what happened here? Good. So the big question that I want you all to keep in mind as I'm going through the talk is how do we scale to 100 plus engineers or 100 plus people without breaking yourself and your org? How do we scale in a sustainable and strategic way that things work, things are optimized, right? And also I think there is a lot that this talk is a lot more target for people that are on the engineering management path. But there is a lot of lessons that staff plus or people that are more on the tech side can take, because I think the best orgs are not the orgs that you have a single person that's doing everything, but you actually have co-ownership of the org, and you have the staff engineers and the principals and the product managers, sometimes the BAs, whatever it is, working along. Okay, so here's the quick agenda for today. So I'm going to tell you some context about my org growth and some of the lessons that, looking back retrospectively, were very important on those years. Then I'm going to go over some practical lessons, like what I wish I knew going back 10 years ago, almost the lessons for my 30-year-old self that had just started on the engineering management path. And then I'm going to try to bring it all together on a framework on okay, if I were to try to scale my impact or to look at scaling or engineering organizations in a very, let's say, structured way, what order operations, what frameworks would they use to kind of keep this kind of almost in your mind as you go through, as you go back to your work and as you see problems that arrive as you have new teams coming in. So, before we start, just so I know how to tailor the presentation, just a quick poll here, how many of you are ICs? Okay. How many of you are managers, first level managers? How many of you are manager of managers? Okay, there's quite a few, okay. That's good, it's good to know. So I think it's the split is almost even. Okay, I start with part one. My org growth, right? So I will start back in 2019. That was when I had just been promoted to director, and that was the first time that I was managing other managers. I was at American Express at the time, and I just got one manager reporting to me. And then 2020, that's context before let's say the hyper growth and getting to 100 plus. But I want you guys to see all the ups and downs. Then 2020, middle of the pandemic, I was director for a while, and I got to have other squads, other groups actually getting to my org, and I was trying to help other teams to work the same way that my teams were working. And then 2021, I did something that was controversial, that I left my director job and I went to big tech. I went to Apple. And I took a massive scope reduction. So I went from managing a org of 30 to go back to the trenches managing a small team of 7 engineers. And then here's where the talk starts. 2022, Nubank. I don't know how many of you know Nubank. Nubank is a big fintech in Latin America. Had just done the IPO, and I had this mix of experience that they needed, like someone that had managed in mobile and fintech, and I took over the mobile platform team. At the time, I was leading more the app experience. And at the end of that year, that's not at the beginning, I think like when I started at Nubank, I had like maybe 30 engineers, but at the end of that year, with the huge demand, a lot of users, I think it was like maybe 60 million customers at the time, but growing at like 5 million customers a month, so it was insane. We got to 49, right? So, and I would jump in the year and then tell you some of the things that I did, looking back, were very important things, and then I would connect back and forth. So the very first thing that I did was like what I call establishing order to chaos, or this is like setting your operational cadence. And I think like, what is this? So this is more about like the meeting structure, the rituals you have. I think like getting the execution in order in a consistent way across the org. Then number two is, I think like one lesson that I had learned early in my leadership journey was that once you're a manager of managers, you not only need to be managing your direct reports, you need to be managing throughout the org. So if you see that there is a low performer, a high performer, someone that the direct manager is not doing a great job, you're responsible to be managing across. And the last thing I think is like, there is one thing that is very important, and that's probably the thing that can speed up things more than anything else, is decision making, right? It's like, yes, putting more engineers on a project help, yes, using AI help, but one of the most powerful things you can do as the engineering leader is helping to speed up decision making. So I'll go into the details a little bit later, but keep in mind those three foundational things that helped me at the time. And then 2023 came, and I decided to move departments. So I moved to the platform infrastructure side. I was on the product org, leading the app experience, the homepage, and then I moved to the platform, to the foundation infrastructure of Nubank. And I got a scope reduction. But I knew that there was a big move, taking things out of like inefficient things that were being done in a duplicated way on the product side to the platform coming in much later. So here are the things that I did in 2023 that I think were foundational to then get last year to 100 plus. The very first thing is, once you passed, I would say 50 engineers, there is no way for you to scale without having a leadership team under you, right? So you need to, like, at the time, I need to start to create those rituals for those teams. And it's very hard to have a leadership team when you have, let's say, only 2 or 3 managers under you. But it's much easier and like almost impossible not to once you have, let's say, 10 managers under you. You need to have some structure. So, and I think the thing that's very important about creating leadership teams is like they need to be around the same level. Like is a flaw that I have seen is if you have a leadership group where you have like a lead engineer and a principal engineer, or like a super junior manager and a senior manager. So you need to try to level that up, right? And they need to be opinionated. I think that's one thing that I found is that if each one of the managers is just caring about their piece of the pie, they're not looking at the whole org, things are not going to scale much longer. So you need to cultivate that, and that was one of the things that I did. The second one was like unlock the cultural levers. So I think like once your group goes over, let's say 50 or like 30 plus, you need to like create some identity, right? Like, and I think that might be what kind of things this group does that's different than the other groups, or like what are the things, like, for example, knowledge sharing. What are the things you do for preparing for on calls, or what is the thing that's different about this group? And I think the most important out of this is like, you need to start to build a long-term view. Things like you need to start to not only what we're going to be doing for the rest of the year, what we're going to be doing next year, right? How do you do that, right? I think like the easiest thing that I have found is you start to cluster problems, you start to do benchmarks outside, you start to talk to people, and you're going to have a very good idea of what you need to do next, right? Again, I'm going to go on details into this, but just walking you through. And then 2024 came 88 people at the end of the year, right? And differently than on the 2022, 2024 was a year where there was a lot of reorgs, a lot of different parts of the organization moving into my org. So I needed to, whenever those different, let's say, orgs got merged into mine, I need to level up, right? I need to, and I think one of the most important things here is once you have groups that have been working different ways, you see that you don't have the same tenure around, right? For example, you have one squad that has like 2 lead engineers that have been in the company for 5 years, and you just got another squad that might have only new people, right? So one of the things you need to do is start to distribute that. But it's almost a weight of impossible. It's impossible to balance perfectly. But is your job as you're scaling the org is to move a little bit things around so the groups are a little bit more even distributed in multiple dimensions, like not only seniority, not only tenure, but also the archetypes you have in the different groups. And who are the people that can help some group that was struggling, right? Then the other thing, and that's one of the biggest things that I want you to get at the end of the talk is, we talk about reorgs as a very bad thing, as a bug, right? And I want you to see this as a feature. For that to happen, you need to, almost the same way we do continuous deployment, you need to think about how can we do small changes in the org that are not going to be traumatic and are going to be, I would say, easy to roll back if you need to, but how can you almost dry run it first? So I think that was another thing that I did a lot. And the last thing is, once you have an org of 100 people on organization, Nubank at the time was maybe 8,000 people company-wide, you need to be operating as a driving by razors for the things you want to see differently at the company level. And also to get visibility of your group. So you need to be more, I think the bar raiser is the Amazon term, but like, is not only the one that's asking for different things, or is the one that is guiding the company on a different direction. And I'm also going to go into the details here. And here's the thing. Then this year is already more than 100 people on the department. But I think the biggest thing is like, it took me nearly 8 years and a lot of ups and downs to be able to get a org of 100 plus and to be prepared to handle that, right? It was not overnight. And the rest of the talk is like, what did I learn on the hypergrowth from like, not 49, but actually 30 when I joined, right? All the way to 100 plus. So here are the practical lessons, right? Here are the big things that I wish if I had to go back, right? I think the very first thing, execution is the thing that breaks or makes organization to be successful. It is the thing that in a big organization, the orgs, the business units that are delivering are the ones that are going to get more attention, more resources, let's say more people, right? And I think this seems controversial at first, but I don't think it's controversial at all. Like, I think it's like, a lot of times a bad decision is better than no decision at all, because you at least are going to get some input, you can iterate, right? And like, a lot of leadership, I find, is about having a position, right? And I have found a lot of, let's say, engineering managers, directors that they stay vague and wishy-washy, and they let the teams figure out, right? you see that there is some decision that needs to be made and they don't intervene, right? And I think one of the most powerful things you can do is you need to have context to be able to guide the decision and to be okay if it was a bad decision, because once the team sees that it is okay to take bad decisions, it is okay to, the most important thing is not spend a lot of time researching or like trying to figure out the perfect thing, a lot of things start to run a lot smoother. The other thing is, so if execution is the basis, right, the very next thing is people management, right? And I think there is like two big things here that I want to focus on is like, if you cannot manage 100 people, right? You cannot do people management of 100 people. What do you focus on as engineering manager or as the engineer director, right? Or as a leader? You focus on the low and the highs. And I think like the one key lesson is that the patterns of low performance are sadly the same almost. They're super narrow. Like I think like if I take all the performance improvement plans that I have seen engineers struggling and people that we had to let go, they usually fail or had problems because of one of the 10 reasons. There may be a dozen reasons why almost all low performers, they struggle with some of that. On the other spectrum, the high performers, they are almost unique, right? And I think one lesson for me here is like, that's especially true at the executive level, where at the beginning of my career, I would get super frustrated with the executives, like, how is that VP not seeing that problem? How does that person doesn't know how to do whatever it is, reliability, or what do they don't know? Because what brought them there was not being well-rounded. It was actually for being super good in something very specific, right? And they were good enough in other things, right? But I think that's there are two ways on this lesson. It's like, one, like the high performers are going to be great for something very unique, and you need to double down on that and be able to sell that for promotions or whatever it is, right? And when you look for people above you in the organization, you should not get frustrated for the things that they don't do as well as you do, but you need to try to find what are the big leverage that they have and try to leverage that. I think like I struggle a lot with that because I would expect things to be like folks to be better than me in all dimensions once they have higher in the organization. That's not true. The other thing is, and this is like for the lesson about building a leadership group, right? Like you need to have a leadership group under you, and the very first thing that happens every time I try to do this is they don't see their peers, or they don't see that group as their first level team. They see that as a second level. What I mean by that is they always want to prioritize what I call their kingdom, right? Like, and here's an example of a situation that you might have seen. It's like, let's say a VP or the CTO asks you as the director or VP, okay, we need to have a new squad in the next 2 weeks to work on this new product area or to build this new platform, but we don't have new headcounts. Then you go to your leadership team, it's like, folks, we're gonna have to move folks around. This is very important for the company. Here's why. And a lot of people, the first reaction is avoidance. It's like, not my problem, like I'm not gonna give my people, right? Instead of like, no, this is the most important thing we can do for the company. It's more important than whatever is going on inside, right? And this is like, it takes years for the leadership group to finally understand that like that group, those meetings, those weekly staff meetings, it is the most important thing. It is what's gonna like allow them to advance. It's like, is the test of their maturity to the next level. So there is a very good article from Will Larson calling, I don't know what is the name of the article, but I think it's like, treat your peers as your first team, and he goes over the details and is like, you see that a lot of the leadership groups, even the more senior leadership groups sometimes, are like problematic in that way. And that's one of very big things that is easy to say, but it's very hard to do. The other thing is like, I talk about the cultural levers, right? What is culture, right? And there is this podcast with one of the co-founders of Netflix, and he said something that I fully agree, and once I heard it, I could not go back. It's like nothing will tell more what the culture is than who you promote and who you let go. And you would think that like everybody would be super sad the moment you let someone go, right? But it's like, as far as you make that happen in a very structured way, and you give the chance for the person to improve, like actually people are gonna thank you for shaping the culture, because there is nothing more powerful than that. And I think that's sadly something that not a lot of people talk about, right? Like, and yes, there are the other things that also your actions shape the culture, like how you react to an incident in production, how you treat someone, how you call someone out when they're doing something that's not okay, right? But I think like the levers are on hiring, right, promoting and firing. I think that's like, if you're gonna have an org that's bigger than, I don't know, 50 people, you're gonna have to remember you. That's the thing that matters here. The other thing, and that was like a lesson that I learned again and again, managerial cost is real. It's like, a lot of times over the last 3 years, I tried to, we need to have like a couple of engineers dedicated to do this thing. Let's have that engineering manager and that product manager do 50-50, right? They're gonna manage their core squad, but they're also gonna be managing on the side this other group. That doesn't work. Like you're not gonna have attention of those people. Like, it's much better, in my experience, to have a slightly bigger squad of like 7 to 10 people, right? And the engineering manager and the product manager are 100% there, than to have, let's say, 2 of 5 or 2 of 4, because you are not gonna. You would think that like yeah, as an engineering manager, you can like run 2 stand-ups, you can, but the attention you have, it breaks everything else. And I have tried. And it's painful, because that is what's gonna force you to do the actual prioritization, right? It's much easier when you can create things out of thin air, right? Everything, that doesn't work. So keep that in mind. The other thing, write it down. I think like this is especially true when you're doing the small reorgs that I mentioned. It's like, you would be surprised of how things get distorted as they go down in the organization. Like, you tell your leadership group in a meeting, we're gonna do this. These are the reasons. Then like they tell their own managers, and then they tell the ICs, and then when you're hearing back the ICs worry about some things, like, why are you worried about this? It's like, my manager said, you said. It's like, that's a mess. And like, just write it down. It can be like a very simple, like 1-pager. And I think every time I did that over the last 2 reorgs that I did, it worked much smoother. Like, okay, here are the 3 things we want to fix with this reorg. There is a problem with this. We don't have anyone owning this system. We like all the, I don't know, analytics engineers don't have a manager currently. And here's what I hope to get on the other side. And if like this is the source of truth, and remember, as you were discussing reorgs or discussing things, going back, every time you see a distortion on where is that idea coming from, go back to the 1-page. Is there anything here that's not clear? It is very important as you have like chain of commands, let's say, going down, right? So try to write down this, what I call the MDRs, management decision records, or just like the drafts of what you're trying to do. It helps a lot. The same way that we have been using ADRs for executive decision records, so that every time someone wants to go back, it's almost like it would be great to have a MDR repo where you can see the whole history of your org, right? And all the decisions you made to get to the point where you are now. And then that was also a very hard lesson that I need to learn again and again. Is like, not everything needs consensus, and that's a good thing. It's like, consensus is a very expensive way to get to alignment, right? And I think David was showing what he called the DACI, right? Not the RACI, right? That's the driver accountable. That I think is actually better than the RACI, but I think like one thing that I found super helpful is like try to define upfront who are the responsible, who are the accountable for that decision, who is going to be the ultimate. Like if I had to boil down this project to one manager and one manager only, or one manager and one staff, who is that going to be? And make it explicit from day one. Okay, the responsible are those three people, whatever, but the accountable are those. So if there is a delay, if there is anything that's happening there, they're going to be the ones that are going to be making the decision, even if that's controversial, right? Even if that goes against what the group thinks and what someone, because again, going back to the thing that we're saying, decision-making and speed of decision-making is the most important thing. And a lot of times you feel that it's not, I'm not saying it's like you should never like try to get consensus. I think you should, like 99% of the time, try to get consensus. But the moment you have some very needy peak kind of coming in, you need to make a decision. And it's like, and folks need to trust that like we're gonna go in the right direction. And once we have real information, real data, we're going to revisit that. So that's a very, very important thing, especially for people like me that are people pleasers, that like everybody's super happy, and like I don't want to have even one engineer that's not 100% happy, but sometimes like making a decision and like going back and like talking to people like always works much better than making everybody else wait, because there is one or two reasons to wait something. I'm not saying never do that, but I'm saying like try to go more on the making the, like avoid consensus as your only alignment method. 8, dry run it first, then roll things out, right? So I talk about the idea of reorgs, right? And I'm not saying that you should be doing changes on the org chart out of thin air. What do? You call it like a small task force. You put people to work with other people. You create like this is just this project, right? You want to try it out to see how things are going to be before you commit, right? So, and a lot of the big reorgs, they don't go well because it's a one-way door, right? There is no way to go back. But if, and it goes to the next one, is like, most reorgs, or what I mean by reorgs, traumatic top-down reorgs, can be totally avoided if you're doing a lot of the internal bounded reorgs. If you're constantly shifting things and there is friction here, moving things, like you're not gonna see the tip of the iceberg as much, right? Of course, the big reorgs, especially when you're having big changes like AI now, are gonna still be needed here and there, but they're going to be a lot more rare than you would think, right? So that's like, think about reorgs in two ways, right? External bounded, internal bounded. Internal bounded is what makes the organization great. It's like what nobody talks about. The external is like, is the thing that happens once every 5 years, that every time that someone hears the word reorg, they get traumatized, right? But that should not be that way. Reorg, the org chart, is actually a very powerful tool to optimize things, to make things run a lot smoother. Then the final lesson, right, is like, again, this is also very controversial. It's like you should manage your skip levels the same way you manage down level. It's like you would think that like executives, they want like executive briefings, they want like numbers, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be treating the CTO of my company just going to be sending, oh, we reached this, we shipped this, right? And you would think that that would make your relationship with the CTO better than if you treat the same way you treat your most junior engineer. What it is like the most junior engineer in your team sometimes don't even want to have the one-on-one with you. They're scared. They're like, what do? You build connection. You try to find like what they do, their hobbies. And I have found that the executives where I had some kind of like personal connections, the relationship worked much better than the ones that I kept on a super high level executive briefing. And you also think, oh, but executives are super busy, they don't have time for that. And I think that's a very bad argument. Actually, executives have a lot of time. They don't want everything compressed. It's an illusion, at least in my experience, that kind of like exec level management is going to work. And especially for your career as you go up in the ranks, having that connection makes folks remember you. And I think it also is the thing that's going to allow someone to trust you or not. Like the numbers are great, but if you don't have the personal connections, it's going to be shady. Then, okay, how do I bring this all together? So if there is one thing that helped me the most over the last 2 years to think about my impact is this idea of the 3 levels of impact framework. It's almost every single week you should be constantly thinking how I can impact at each one of those 3 levels. Like how can I have something that's going to help not only my org, but my skip level, my boss org, and sometimes even the entire company, right? It's like, if you think about your agenda, if you think about your expectations, the projects you're doing, you need to think about, are you splitting your time where you're only in your org, or you also help in some way in your boss org? What are you doing like to help the context across, right? But there is a very important thing to remember about this framework, that it is that you must understand things outside in first. And by that I mean is you need to approach things from the outside in. It's like if you're doing something but you don't understand why is that important for the company, you're gonna have a big problem. So you need to go back almost to the customer or to the C-level, like what is important for the company right now? What is the direction? What are the priorities? And then go like, okay, if that's the thing that's important for the company, or that's the kind of things that the customers are struggling with, then you go like, how is your boss, how is your department helping there? And then how are the things that we are doing actually connecting back to that, right? And then, but you have to remember, you don't have any, or especially if you are at the middle management level, you don't have any influence or authority to make decisions at the company level. You have indirect influence and authority via your boss or your leader on the department or the bigger org, and you have full direct influence and authority on the things you're doing, right? So what that means is almost like, yes, you must understand things there, but you have to start from where you are, right? So you must always act inside out. And that's why kind of like you need to have the context of like what is important, what we're doing, how the things we connect, to then pull in the direction that goes there, right? Because again, if you don't do it this way, you're gonna try to change, like boil the ocean, right? You're gonna try to, like, you're gonna have idea to change the process for the company and you have not tried yourself. So then you go down and remember those things. So how do you do that? Here's the things that I'm gonna try to bring it back, right? So you start from your org to the outside, but you have to remember, you need to understand things outside in, you must act inside out, right? At the same time, right? And here's the framework that I think, like looking back, are the things that I would focus at the different org sizes or as your org mature over time. So how do you do that? You start with your org and with your own leadership chain, right? And you start with what? You start with your org, you start managing low and high performance and establishing your operational cadence. So the very first things you need to focus on, like there is nothing else to do unless you kind of like you're managing execution, you have meetings on time, you have like you're sharing knowledge, and you're managing the low and high performance. Once you get the frameworks, the things established there, then you go to, sorry, I exit the presentation, okay. Then you go to the next level, that it is then you go to building your leadership team, shaping the culture, right? Creating the long-term view, because those are going to be foundational for your next leap. Then leveling up as an org, continuous orgs, right? So you start from your org and you try to level it up. The next thing you need to do is like you look at your manager department and you ask the question, how are we managing performance as a org? How is our calibrations? How are our expectations, right? Like, how is the operational cadence? How is our deployments? How are our plannings, right? You start to look, how can I bring something that I'm doing very well in my org and help my peers or my boss to disseminate that? How can I show, right, something that I did to other people so they inspire them to adopt something better? And then you go to the next level. It's like, okay, we are managing high performance, we have good, let's say, calibrations, like performance, all that stuff. Then you go like, how is the long-term view for my department, right? Do we know what we're going to be doing next year? Do we have a culture here? How are engineers across different directors collaborating? Like, how is the leadership group that I'm part of at my boss org operating, right? And you start to, how can I bring ideas in there, right? And then it's like, you look the same way, like, is there any room for optimization here? Is there anything that I could pitch to my boss so things run more efficiently, right? Like, so, and then, only then, you go to the entire company, right? Or the whole engineering, and you look, okay, how are we managing low and high performance at the company? How is the long-term view, right? And you keep scaling in that way. I think like if you approach things that way, you can have a very structured and organic way to scale organizations. But you would think that once you do that, all levels, you would be happy, but no, I think you never get there. Never get there. I think it's like you're always going to be struggling at one of the levels. You're always going to be back and forth. And there is one more thing, that is a hidden dimension of this framework that I didn't talk much, but I think that's critical for scaling your org, is yourself and your career, right? So we talk about your org, your boss org, the entire company, but there is actually something that I learned the hard way, that at the most senior level, impact is not enough, influence is not enough, right? And just like being visible is not enough, right? What is enough to get promoted to, let's say, C-level? And here are some of the lessons that I want to share, right? So the very first thing is you need to go back to my point about build relationships and cultivating goodwill, right? It's one thing to be doing a lot of things, to have a lot of impact. Another thing is to having goodwill. So goodwill is like people that really trust you, people that really, the relationships are the things that, the people that are gonna bend the rules for your org. You need to get to that point where it's more important to have relationships than goodwill, than to have impact and influence. And that was, again, a very hard lesson for me. It's like, you would think that impact and influence would be the thing that matter, right? But no, it's relationships and goodwill. And ideally, they come hand in hand, right? Ideally, you should not have, it's gonna be very hard to have goodwill if you don't have impact. It's gonna be very hard to have a relationship if you don't have influence, if you don't actually doing good things. And you have to remember, you lose goodwill every time you move jobs because you have to establish the relationship. So even if you're amazing, you're delivering a lot, it takes a while for people to get to trust you. Then the other thing to be promoted at the very high levels is the 10-30-50 rule. Is that it's like you have to be top 10% of something, right? If you break down the most important skills, right, of your job as a leader, you have to be maybe top 10% in something, top 30 in other things, and you cannot be below the top 50 percentile, because that's the thing for example, you're amazing at delivery, but you're a very bad people manager. doesn't matter. You're not going to get promoted. That's the thing that's going to be louder than anything else. So you have to remediate that. You would think that like, oh, strength-based leadership. It is true that you need to focus on your strengths, but you also need to remediate, I would say, the very bad things, the very bad skills that are getting in the way. And I think yesterday someone was saying on the, what was the thing, on the dev dialogue we had, it was like, oh, I'm always the person that's helping everyone, but I don't think I ever had a very good manager that would put my case for promotion. But I'm doing a lot of work, a lot of the glue work, right? And I think another very hard lesson here is like, you need to set expectations in writing tied to a specific rating, right? Like, okay, you can have like expectations about we're going to be delivering this, we're going to be absorbing this org, we're going to be doing all these challenging things. If you don't set the expectation of, okay, what is that going to get for me? Or what rating I'm expecting to get if I deliver those things, right? If you don't get to have this conversation, you're going to be on the, you're amazing, your managers, your leaders like you, but you're going to be on the second wave. If we have spotting promotions, if we have, and you're going to be almost being passed through, right? And the other thing is like not only set your expectations tied to a specific rating or to a specific outcome for you and your career, stay calibrated every month. Ask like every one of the goals, every one of the skills that you put to develop, how I'm trending. Like, and also a lot of the things are going to change, right? At the beginning of the year, as you define some things, the company might be changing, and you're not going to be tying back to like the things you defined a year ago. You need to be continuously moving that, right? And then the last thing is like be the driving bar raiser. And this is something that I talk on my talk last year. That's like, we all start as implementers, right? If you think about the career of a software engineer, it's like, oh, you start by implementing stuff, right? You start by migrating stuff from like one language to another, by having a very well-defined task. Then you go to solver, right? Like you get to senior, you're kind of like, oh, you get a problem, you have a feature, right? Then you go to staff, you go to finder. Not only you expect to solve the problems that come your way, you're also expected to be looking out for risks and mitigating them, or looking for what are the big things that I need to do, what are the big platforms, what are the things that are going to get on the way, what are the things that are costing a lot in our infrastructure that could be optimized a lot, right? But it is also not only about finding problems, it's about driving, right? Like, and the drivers are the ones that are operating, are the ones that they're not only able to implement, solve, and find, they are able to go, and whenever they see something that's not moving, they go there and they help to move things forward. And I think like, if you are the driving bar raiser, the one that is not only telling folks what should be fixed, right? Or not only fix small things, but the one that's helping to drive the big things organizational-wise, is going to be very hard if you, again, cultivate goodwill and all those things. Very hard to contain your impact, right? So I think this is the last dimension of the framework. And I think the conclusion is great leadership is about distilling complexity, establishing cadence, and driving accountable execution, right? It's also about sharing the vision, being the vision, and driving the vision. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it's all about organizational resilience, right? When I talk about reorgs, when I talk about creating a leadership group, right? It's all about how can you go on vacation for a month and things still be running, right? How can you be out of the system, right? Like, so I think that's pretty much all I had to cover today. And I think those are the top lessons that I learned going over this journey to like 100+ people under my org. I think we have some time for questions, folks. Thank you.
So being a manager's manager, obviously...
This was...
Okay. I could be louder. Well, you manage managers. I have seen often you ask a team, they can always have more people in their teams. that is mainly comes with the intent to build some sort of a siloed operations. They want to have all expertise within their team. Now, one of the items you mentioned is collaboration. You have to be good at working with other teams, like managers collaborating with other managers with your teams. Now, how do you find this balance between collaboration, or how do you remind your teams and ICs of cross-team collaboration while their mind is always thinking, we need more people so we can build all expertise within my team?
That's is a great question, and I think there is a very fine line between collaboration and delegation, right? There are a lot of I will tell you a story about I got a few different squads reorg into my org, right? And there was one particular squad that they had this behavior that anything that's not owned by them is work that they need to put on someone else's backlog, right? It's we need to do this, but it touches this other platform. We're not the owner of that platform. So we're blocked, right? And I think collaboration is not about, I would say, it's not only how to work with people, but knowing the fine line where where you can cross the boundary and do something with the help of other people, right? And where is okay, that's a little bit too much, right? But I don't know if your question is because the argument that I could use, if we have to cross those boundaries, then we need more people, right? It's no, you don't, right? But it is a very hard topic to how do you? But I think going back to the culture, once you have an org that's able to, you have groups that are able to collaborate well, and you're able to role model those things, and you as an engineering leader, you can go back in whatever all hands you have, that's an example of a great collaboration of how those teams did, and that's how we want to replicate, right? And there is a limit of how many headcounts you can keep adding on a group for that to be efficient. But there's so many trade-offs to balance that it's very hard to give an answer on what is the balance between collaboration and adding new headcount, or it's tricky. But we can talk more later.
Thank you. I am very curious to hear about the dry run and the dry run of an upcoming reorganization.
Yeah.
And then also the decision. I mean, you said transparent with the decisions, and how and at what time is that decision log or whatever communicated all the way down? Is it communicated all the way down?
Yes.
And how do you make sure that that actually is communicated and not get stuck on some other manager level? So
perfect. So the dry run, right? I think there are different levels of dry runs. I think one of the things that I learned doing reorgs at scale last year, I think I did 5 reorgs or so, is that there is almost a formula, let's say, at least that I came up with that worked well. It's I do the first draft of the reorg, then I bring, let's say, my direct team, and they stress test that. Then I bring all the staff engineers, and I let them kind of speak their mind, and they're going to criticize things. So the first dry run is you start to bring the next level management before even you do anything, right? Folks, this is the idea. Here are the goals. We want to solve those things. Here's my proposal. This is the first draft. Go and hammer it down, right? And then you take a note and you iterate again. It's okay, here's the V2 based on the feedback. I'm not going to do everything you're wishing that we could do, but is this acceptable, right? So I think that's the first level of dry run. Then once we have not consensus, but alignment on, okay, I think everybody can leave with this new org chart. It's how can we take from here to there? Is there any, let's say, project that's struggling? then we can create a task force, or we can move one engineer or two on a temporary basis to one project, right? We can have a different engineering manager taking over like a track of work, right? Then every week, every 2 weeks on your staff meetings with your leadership group, you ask, how is that going? And then you keep kind of like not working, iterate again. We need more people, we need to, and then you finally announce, but I think you announce in multiple ways. So how do we ensure that the message gets communicated to everyone? So I usually have a Slack channel with my whole org, right? In case at Nubank, I had the mobile platform group, a private channel with everyone, and we would communicate very transparently, oh, we're kicking off this new task force, and every time we would do a move of like, oh, this is official, I would write down a big message saying, okay, folks, over the last 2 months, we experienced this, and we actually learned it's working much better this way. Starting today, these people are going to be moving to this new manager. And I think then we do a town hall with a Q&A. There's a very, I think like once you do enough reorgs, it kind of, you get to it's like always one after the other. Yeah. But we can talk more. Thank you, folks. We're out of time.